If you have access, I'm good.
Good morning and welcome to WNHH-FM Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting a look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick the morning after the nation's first presidential primary contest in New Hampshire. A new team in town is trying to make New Haven and Connecticut tick for the candidate who's tied for second in the polls for the Democratic nomination. He wasn't on the ballot last night. He is not Joe Biden. He is not Elizabeth Warren. He's not Pete Buttigieg. I think I said it wrong. He's not Amy Klobuchar. He's not even Tulsi Gabbard. He's Mike Bloomberg. A team Bloomberg has hit the ground running in Connecticut more than any Democratic campaign so far, forming an organization in our state in the advance of the April 28 primary. Brett Broesder is piloting that statewide effort, and he's in the WNHH studio to tell us more about it and help us examine the post-New Hampshire campaign landscape. Thanks for coming in, Brett.
Hey, thank you, Paul. Great to be here.
Sorry, that was a lot of words. And thanks to New Haven Hospital for providing support for this program. So what do you think? What do you think last night, now that we've seen the wreckage, the year of leading up to the vote, it actually happened? What's your take?
Look, I think 2% of the delegates have been chosen now in this race. And by the time Nevada has, by the time the polls have closed in Nevada, will be less than 5%. But comes Super
They have 3%. They have almost 3% of the
I think between
delegates?
South Carolina and Nevada.
Oh, you're counting South Carolina,
Yeah,
of course.
so I
And
think-
please come close to the mic. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And we end up in a situation where you get through those first 4 states and less than 5% of the delegates have been decided. So Super Tuesday, when Mike is on the ballot, 66.
Is Bloomberg on the ballot in Nevada and South Carolina?
No, he's not. Not until Super Tuesday states.
Okay.
So 66% of delegates will be decided on Super Tuesday, and then
66%.
yeah, it's incredible.
Wow.
So then you're off to the races, and Mike is putting operations in states that account for that 95% will be decided, and Connecticut is
It
one
has
of those.
definitely been an interesting strategy. Before we get into strategy, because I love the weeds, you love the weeds, but I think our listeners might first like to hear what you think about the results in New Hampshire. So you're right. At this point, it hasn't been about numerically accumulating delegates to determine who the nominee is going to be. It's about the first 2 contests in Iowa and New Hampshire. We saw how human beings actually vote. And what did we find out when human beings voted after a year of punditry?
I think we have an open field, and we have a great list of candidates, but unfortunately, the bottom line is Donald Trump is winning.
Mm-hmm.
And we need a candidate who has the proven leadership and has taken on the tough issues and won, whether that's guns, climate change, public health. And that's exactly what Mike has done throughout his tenure, whether it's as mayor, as a businessman, or as a philanthropist. And he'll do the same against Trump in November.
Guns control, public health, and what was the third thing?
Climate change.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll get into some of that too. So you're saying, your guys coming in now. What gets me is, how does he have 15% of the latest Q poll support of Democratic voters if he hasn't started running yet? Is that because he spends so much money on TV?
Well, they're national polls, and because he has robust operations and has made smart investments in that 95% where other candidates aren't. The typical way you run a Democratic primary for president is you raise a bunch of money, you barrel it into Iowa, you barrel it into New Hampshire, and
try to survive the cut.
Yeah, yep, and then use the earned media bump you get from doing well to
which
to raise
Amy
more
did
money.
from a debate. That was interesting. Amy Klobuchar's debate got her $5 million in a couple of days, and it got her. I guess New Hampshire, if tell me if I'm wrong, had an unusually high percentage of people just couldn't make up their mind to the end, and it seemed that especially among women, they at the end all swarmed to Amy Klobuchar. Is that what we saw?
Yeah, it certainly looks that way.
Because we had 3 candidates basically in the 20s. Amy might have been tight under. They don't find like 90% reporting. So you basically had Klobuchar, Buttigieg, and Sanders. Do you think that's basically who we have left besides Bloomberg, or what?
Again, there's so many delegates in play still, so many states to have had their primaries. So, speculating on the field or who in the head-to-head is probably above my pay grade. But
so you say we have an open field. That's one takeaway from last night. There isn't
Yeah.
only one person in taking it. But anything you read, let's say in Biden not doing well, in Elizabeth Warren tanking, and Klobuchar beating expectations, and Sanders, 78 years old, winning that race.
Look, I think Joe Biden is one of the best public servants that we've ever had in this country, and I think he is certainly somebody who, if he did well in those first couple states, would be would have been very well positioned to do well against Trump in November. However, it looks as though he's having a difficult time, and we really look. Mike Bloomberg is focused on beating Donald Trump.
Yeah,
and we see Mike as the.
I wasn't asking you to trash
firewall.
other candidates. I'm just wondering what you thought
No,
the
no, no,
voters
by
were
no means,
saying.
by no means.
With their votes, what were they saying? Separate from personality, separate from candidacies. Was there any message in the vote in New Hampshire?
I think it's that there's still an opening for a candidate to come in come Super Tuesday and do very well. And I think Mike's that candidate.
All right. Now, Bob McCormick, thanks for listening. Is it true that Bloomberg has spent $360 million of his own money on the campaign?
I'm not sure of the exact figure, but I know that he's making a lot of smart investments in.
I think there was even like over $100 million on TV ads just in Super Tuesday states, correct?
That sounds like it could be right. I don't have that exact figure on me.
But what has he said? He's willing to spend $1 billion, right?
Yeah, he said he's willing to spend whatever it takes to beat Donald Trump, and I think that's very indicative of how he is committed to doing exactly that by how he's signed leases through November in the 6 key states that are going to decide this election, decide general election.
Now, what are those 6 states?
So it's Arizona, North Carolina, Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, and
Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And the last night, Trump people really looking at New Hampshire. I know it's only 3 electoral votes or something, but they believe they can flip that one.
But yeah, and that's why I know Mike Bloomberg has said that he has started today investing in New Hampshire and opening up offices because. And
obviously, get the nomination will be in all 50.
Yep.
And we're talking about the post-New Hampshire landscape with the coordinator of Connecticut's Bloomberg for President campaign, Brett Broesder. The one campaign that's really, and I could be wrong about this, but from my observation, is really the only campaign right now that's been up and running in Connecticut, where we have an April 28th primary. How many electoral votes at stake in Connecticut?
We have anywhere between 64 and 74, but we definitely have as many as Iowa and New Hampshire combined.
But what does that mean? Why is there because of superdelegates, or what's the reason?
Yeah, it's
64 to 74.
It's a superdelegate.
So I think I don't have a PhD in math, so I'm never going to understand how this process works. Okay, now you have a state operation. I also want to get the Dixville Notched. So that's a part in New Hampshire where everyone stays up at midnight and casts the first votes, and the whole town votes, right? How many people vote?
The exact number I forget, but it's something that's always considered a swing.
Handful, yeah. And so Mike Bloomberg won, even though he wasn't on the ballot.
Yeah, on both sides, which is incredible.
Both sides.
It's my understanding that he won both Democrats and Republicans.
Interesting. And I think there were 2 under the radar events in the Bloomberg campaign in the last few weeks that I didn't get much attention. Bloomberg's getting a lot of attention. When he puts ads on Trump, he's getting a lot of attention. But the 2 things I found the most interesting, one of them was he had a press conference with the recent Secretary of the Navy who left after having a fight over discipline in the military with Trump. And he said, I'm a Reagan Republican for Bloomberg. Why do you think that didn't get much notice?
Look, I think the media cycles right now with so much going on with the elections and Donald Trump doing something.
There was something powerful in that.
Yeah, it definitely is a powerful statement. And
I mean, when I work with someone who's a big Trump fan, he discounted that as saying, well, that's a never Trumper. And he might be right. The kind of Republicans who party no longer exists, which the kind of moderate Republican and bipartisan and all that. Although a Reagan, when I was growing up, a Reagan Republican was not considered a moderate. But I thought there was something politically significant about that vote. I guess it's also with the Brett Stevens and the New York Times and the Thomas Friedman, the people who are urging Bloomberg to run. I think that is sort of what Amy Klobuchar is claiming she can bring to the table, what Buttigieg is claiming he can bring to the table, which is that sort of crossover, versus the base, which Bernie does a great job, Bernie Sanders, of exciting.
Well, look, I think Mike Bloomberg, who has been the chief executive of not only one of the most successful companies that America's seen in modern history, but has also been the chief executive of the largest city in our country, and one of the bluest cities.
Is that bigger than South Bend?
A little bit.
Okay. What I love? South Bend mayor got almost as many votes as Justin Ellicker got in New Haven in the other. Okay, so we're going to get the New Haven operation, but people already just want me to ask you about, I was going to wait till issues. And the second thing I want to talk to you about that I thought was the most significant, which got no play, was Bloomberg's op-ed about his tax policy. which I actually thought was the most interesting things that happened in the last 2 weeks. But I'll tell you my theory on that. But anyway, people just want me to ask you about the stop and frisk. So Trump went on the attack. A pretty damaging audio was released about Mike Bloomberg. Bloomberg was coming under major fire for promoting and expanding stop and frisk policies that disproportionately affected minorities in millions of stops in New York. And he thought it was a great policy to stop crime in poor neighborhoods, and that's how you got the guns. And then he said, I made a mistake, and he went and apologized for it. And the recording has him using, language about that's who commits this crime. You got to throw him up against the wall. It's the black kids who commit the crime. We got to get the guns off them. How damaging is that, and what's the response to that? Because I'm sure you guys have been talking about that.
Look, Mike has apologized in 2019 for his for stop and frisk, and it's something that he said he has apologized for. And if you want a president who's not going to apologize, I think we have that one, Donald Trump. But and he's committed to doing better when it comes to criminal justice reform. But to talk a little bit about what Mike did do as mayor, he dropped incarceration rates by 40%. Are
you talking about like Rikers, or are you talking about like in New York jails?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's as incarceration rates went up nationally during that time. He also dropped juvenile containment by 60%, and he put into place a program called the Youth Initiative. It was the Young Men's Initiative. I'm sorry, and the Young Men's Initiative is something that was focused on helping young men of color achieve success. And it was a very powerful program that became the model for My Brother's Keeper, which is a major program that I know New Haven under Mayor Harp, and I believe it's in line with what Mayor Elliker would be doing. But
so, Broesder, let's talk Connecticut.
Okay,
you have an office. You're the campaign chair, right, in the state.
State director. Correct.
State director. How many people you got working for you so far?
So currently we have 5, but our plan is to have dozens over the next few weeks.
Over the next few weeks, you're hiring.
Correct.
So you're hiring dozens. How about number of volunteers in offices?
So we're looking to have offices across the state in the double digits.
Number? Okay, over 10.
Yeah, or 10 or more.
And then how many do you have so far?
Currently, we are in the process of opening our first.
Where's that?
Which will be our headquarters in Milford.
And why Milford?
So it's a city where Donald Trump won in 2016. And obviously our focus is on beating Donald Trump. It also is a place that is...
That votes both ways. It's a city that votes for Donald Trump, but often votes Democrat as well as Republican.
Correct.
And also the other thing is that in a national poll, people think New Haven got picked as the model community that shows the diversity of America, which is actually way off. It was New Haven, Milford. It was a statistical geographical area.
Yeah.
That kind of showed this is the face of America.
Yep.
And so you're going to open in Milford. How many volunteers you got so far?
So we had an event in Stamford last weekend that had over 70 volunteers that came out to.
Really?
Yeah, it was incredible.
What kind of people? Who's being drawn? We know that Bernie's getting a lot of young people, as well as more veteran kind of lefty activists, but also just a lot of young people very idealistic about climate change, about money out of politics, clean politics, about universal health care. That's sort of who's coming out there. Who's coming out for Mike? It's the 70 people in Stamford.
Look, we had a broad swath of folks, young, older, gender, male, female, and some folks who probably see climate change as their key issue, guns as their key issue, or the economy. I mean,
that seems to be the 3 big issues.
I think that's what we kind of heard at this event. But overall, I mean, I think we're just seeing a broad swath of folks come out and be excited about Mike's candidacy.
And Bloomberg did heavily fund candidates pushing gun control in the last 2018 congressional elections.
Correct.
A lot of them got elected on that issue.
Yep, and he founded Mayors Against Illegal Guns when he was mayor, after seeing the devastation gun violence was causing in New York. And I know that Mayor Harp, I believe, was a part of Mayors Against Illegal Guns. I know that Mayor Finch was as well. And then...
and so are you doing ad buys already in Connecticut? Are you going to wait closer to the primary?
Yeah, I think there's targeted ad buys happening across the country.
But I mean, are you doing Connecticut, or is it just the people in Connecticut will see them on national channels?
Yeah, there is a paid media budget in Connecticut that has already went into effect and will continue to.
So always have you reserved slots? Or you actually started airing slots on the nightly news on Channel 8 and stuff.
I'm not too intimately involved with
Okay.
as you know, these presidential campaigns are very large
Yeah,
organizations.
you mentioned 10 offices. I found that very interesting because I don't claim to know from the inside what a campaign's like. Like, how important is an office for running a campaign? How much of it is figuring out the ad buys out on the online, which you guys are good at, the online stuff, versus like rounding up a ground operation, and how much of a role does a physical office play in a ground operation?
Look, I think both play an active role, and ensuring that there's a place for volunteers to come to really harness that support and run the canvases from and make the phone calls and do the hard work that goes into an
And will you be
operation.
doing a New Haven office?
Yes, we will.
And do you have anyone in charge of the New Haven operation?
Not currently, but we are in the process of bringing somebody on board who is local and is.
I know someone that you're hiring, but how about, are you going to have someone in charge of New Haven, or is that going to come out of Milford?
We will have somebody. It's kind of a structure where you have basic campaign structure. Where you
Like, how
feel
important? How
organized,
important is? I know that every area is important, but where do you see the bulk of your votes? You looking suburbs going to be coming out for Bloomberg? Do you think? You know what was interesting about 2016? Bernie Sanders held the biggest political rally in 46 years in New Haven on the Green before the primary. 46 years,
but lost New Haven,
and then lost soundly.
Yeah.
There was no enthusiasm visibly for Clinton. And she figured out how the city worked and how the politics of the city worked and creamed them, especially in the black community. Now, Sanders' operation is better this time. So how big is New Haven on your radar, and where specifically do you see the heart of the Bloomberg vote in Connecticut?
Look, I think we want to be across the state, obviously. But when it comes to the 3rd Congressional District, New Haven's a place that had nearly 17,000 votes in the 2016 presidential primary, which is
and in general, in over 20, yeah.
Yeah, and almost double what
biggest group of Democratic voters in the state.
Yeah, yep. It is a in the 3rd Congressional District. It is by far and away.
I meant city in New Haven statewide had the most Democratic votes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess you can't ignore it.
No, not at all. No.
And
by no means.
And what's your role specifically as the campaign director?
Running in-state operations.
So hiring a staff.
Bringing on a staff.
But it sounds like you don't do the media buys. That probably comes out of New York, or.
Yeah, we have conversations based on.
But is
what we're seeing
ground
on the
game
ground.
sort of Brett's toolbox here?
Yeah,
Are you here for ground game?
I think ground game. The more the grass tops work as well.
What does grass tops mean?
Talking to the political leaders, the elected officials.
Yes, and you have experience in that.
Yeah. Yep.
So getting endorsements and things like that.
Yeah, and working to ensure.
And how important are they? Because I have a theory that most endorsements don't matter from local politicians, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Do people look to their local elected officials to figure out whom to vote for in a primary?
I think they do. I think it matters in a few different respects, right? I think it matters from, amazing reporters like you, Paul, writing about the support that's coming out. I think it matters in a sense of showing kind of a groundswell of support, and it matters that look, a lot of the elected officials are those who know their local areas and know, where to hold an event, where to who to talk to, what the key issues on the ground are.
That's true. One thing I noticed that when Hillary Clinton was here, there was a staffer for Mayor Harp, who kind of arranged some very interesting, smaller but influential people events for her. Whereas the Sanders thing, they say, how come you didn't come to our event? We had 10 times as many people. And I said, because you never told us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like they knew who to talk to.
Yeah, it's
how to target. I've been interesting about micro-targeting with and tell me what you think about this, Brett, because you have a lot more experience in politics than I do. It seems like with each 4-year election cycle, there's a new leap in big data and targeting to find who your voters are. So the big thing in 2008 was Facebook. So, Chris left Facebook and ran Obama's campaign with Facebook, and that's how he had the meetups building on what Howard Dean tried to do. Then in 2012 was when big data came into play. So the famous room in the basement of the Obama campaign, where they figured out in the swing states which TV shows which were being watched on reruns by which factory workers covering off of which shift. so that Obama could spend only a fraction of what Romney was spending to get ads that had more punch with swing voters. Now, what I've been really interested is reading what Bloomberg did with his first batch of ads. And tell me if I'm wrong about this, because you're in the campaign, where he went to the most important swing states and figured out within each state which voters were going to be open to switching from Trump to a Democrat on which issues. And he had different issues tailored to run online and on TV in those districts based on that data. Am I right? Is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, and look, I'm not intimately involved with that piece, but I will say this: Donald Trump is somebody who has been light years ahead of Democrats when it comes to social media. I think he in the digital game.
Facebook said it was the best they ever saw, best campaign.
Yeah, which is frightening. And I think we're
so now you guys have been good on search words. So anytime anybody looks up something about New Hampshire or Trump and stuff, you'll see a Bloomberg ad first. And there's been a change with Google where advertising content does show up in the search results.
Yeah, I think we have some of the like Bloomberg, somebody who has been lived the American dream based on starting a company that is focused on information technology.
Right.
And being
he figured out how to
curve.
get investors with the Bloomberg box. That was the famous innovation where you get faster information that was really important to help you make money on a trade before somebody else does.
And he's stayed ahead of the curve when it comes to media. Whether that's
I guess what I'm asking when I'm watching with him afar, because I'm very interested in this, he seems to be going in both directions, I guess because he has a lot of money. So on the one hand, he's doing the blanket ads that seem to be yesterday's ads, Super Bowl, major media markets, but he's also doing that micro-targeting with that kind of Bloomberg box precision. So I guess you guys are obviously believing it takes both.
Yeah, and I think in a fractured media market environment, you need to play at every medium and at every level. I think that our campaign is looking to do exactly that, and it's, I think, best equipped to take on Donald Trump in November.
All right. Dateline New Haven. Brett Broesder, he's running the Bloomberg, Connecticut race. And we're done with New Hampshire, folks. We're going to Super Tuesday, but Connecticut's getting started with the Bloomberg campaign has going to be opening up to 10 offices and started hiring, including in New Haven. Brett, what's your background? You told me beforehand you grew up in Minnesota. You've been in Connecticut 7 years. You lived in New Haven for a while. You always been a politics guy?
No, I didn't grow up as a politics guy. When I transferred schools when I was I did my first couple years of college in South Dakota. I transferred schools and started up a college Democrats group, and I transferred to Rhode Island College in Providence. And just kind of
Providence seems like a really fun place to go to college.
Fantastic, love it. And
so when did you catch that politics bugs and decide you want to do Young Democrats? What made you involved in politics?
It was the 2004 presidential election.
Kerry Bush.
Yeah. Yep. And
not an election that inspired a lot of people on either side.
No.
How did a young person like you start caring about politics because of that election?
I think it was the war, and just the overall the heightened kind of dismay in the political environment, and got involved and got to know some folks in Rhode Island, and it kind of just took off from there. I got really interested in it, and
what brought you to Connecticut?
So I moved here to work for a nonprofit in New Haven.
Which one?
Concan.
Yep.
And then was fortunate enough to meet my wife at that job, and then went to work for Bill Finch, and it was great in Bridgeport. And then from there, went to Hartford.
What did you do for Luke? And you went for Luke Bronin, the mayor of Hartford, right?
Yeah, I was his communications director.
And what did you do for Finch?
His communications director as well.
Okay. Were you working with Bill Camphor from the Register?
I was. Bill's great.
I used to be on the beat with him when we covered cops and stuff like that. He's a great guy.
Nice.
All right, so you've been involved in Connecticut politics, urban Connecticut politics.
Correct.
And now you got this gig coming out. How old are you, Brett?
36.
All right. And so what made you want this job?
I've always been a fan of Mike since he was mayor, but it was kind of three major things that had brought me into the campaign. One is I think he has the best story to tell when it comes to his upbringing. He's somebody whose father never made more than $6,000 a year.
What did his father do?
I forget exactly what.
Grew up in Boston, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Medford, Mass. And
at a time when $6K you could live on, it's like making 30 now, right?
I believe so. I haven't looked exactly at the translation there, but
so you felt he had the best story. He kind of made a fortune on his own.
Yeah, and at 39, he was unemployed, and then he, based on his entrepreneurial spirit and vision for the future, he puts together this company and has lived the American dream. I think that's fantastic. I think number two is kind of something we talked about earlier, the young men's initiative that became My Brother's Keeper, I think, is just a fantastic program. I had the fortune to work with that program.
Oh, what'd you do?
Well, working with that program in Bridgeport, intimately, and in Hartford,
Oh,
which was just a fantastic program. And I think Mike's vision for that program translating into a national success was great. And then 3, I think he's the candidate to beat Donald Trump.
so it's the best chance of winning.
Definitely.
And then now, so I got a Trump voter writing in about. So let's go to issues. He's taken a strong stand on being for gun control. He funded candidates who are for gun control, especially in the wake of the Florida Parkland massacre, but even before that. And so here's a Trump voter who says, does he think taking law-abiding citizens' guns will sell in middle America? What did Bloomberg learn in 2018 about the ability of gun control to sell in middle America? Because as this listener says, the conventional wisdom, at least before 2018, was that you can't win the heartland. You can't win races in the heartland if you support gun control. Do you think there's a counter argument to that?
Look, I think he, from what I recall, and maybe I have these numbers a little off, but I believe there were 24 congressional races that he invested in, and won 18 of them. I think he showed.
And were they all on the coasts?
In terms of the geography of them, I don't.
I thought the majority were not in the coasts. I thought those were swing districts.
I believe so. Yeah, well, they were definitely swing districts, and I think that's also because of that.
I was giving you a softball there, Brett.
No. Understood. So, but look, I think common sense gun reforms are something that sell across the country.
And what are you talking about? Background checks? What are you talking about with common sense?
Correct. I think when you get into federal background checks and some of the changes that can happen at the federal level, I think it's critical to make those investments. And from what Mike saw as mayor, firsthand saw the impact of gun violence that was killing young men and women across the city, and he put his money where his mouth is.
And you keep talking about climate change. Last night I was telling my wife about how it seems like people were drawn for climate change at Bloomberg, but I couldn't remember anything specifically he had done on that. Where does he stand on climate change, and what action has he taken?
So Mike has seen the awful impact of coal plants across America. So again, putting his money where his mouth is, he invested in Beyond Carbon, which is a philanthropic effort aimed at closing down coal plants across the country. And in part because of his efforts, 302 coal plants of the more than 500 have been closed across the country.
But isn't there another element to that program where you have money invested for other jobs for people?
Yes, there is a job preparation element to that for sure.
I mean, you can't talk about that issue without that part of it.
Understood.
Okay.
But I mean, look, the coal plants in middle America and the Ohios are what make air pollution such a problem in Connecticut.
Right.
And I think that
some Democrats find it hard to talk about that and fracking in Western Pennsylvania because it's hard to broaden the issue to talk about investments. So some people will say you can't just get rid of those jobs. And other people say you can, since those jobs are going away anyway. And we got to live on the planet by not having the ozone layer destroyed, but it has to be accompanied with the ability to create new jobs and industries for people.
Correct. And employment preparation is a key component of what Mike has been investing in.
You mentioned public health. I know that he's famous and infamous for joining Rosa DeLauro in pushing for taxes on sugary drinks and other sugary products that lead to diabetes. And I guess he enacted a tax on large sodas in New York. Right? Is that what you're talking about, public health, or other matters?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But
I think he's going to get blowback from that. I think Trump people will use that. If Bloomberg's the candidate, they will do ads in middle America like he's against you getting a soda.
Yeah, I think there's a number of issues and a number of attacks that you can have on any candidate. But at the end of the day, I think Mike is the one with the proven leadership and willing to take on tough issues like that.
And education, is he a proponent of charter schools? You said you were for Concan. That was sort of his one of his appeals to you, education reform under the charter banner? Or?
Yeah, look, I think that he, as mayor of New York, saw how difficult things were in the school system, and ensuring that there are strong investments in public schools. I think that includes public charters, but ensuring that there are strong regulations on schools overall, including charters specifically.
Mm-hmm. But he does support charter schools.
Correct.
Okay. And then here's the thing, and maybe it's a little wonky. I thought the most interesting issue discussion of the past couple of weeks was about how to close the income inequality. Bloomberg had an op-ed in the New York Times, and I guess I'm from an era where it mattered what was on an op-ed page in the New York Times. When I was preparing for this show to look it up, do you know it was hard to find it even on the New York Times site?
Interesting.
Like if you searched income inequality in Bloomberg, you got articles going back over 2 years, and no one wants to talk about that, even though income inequality is such a big issue. So Bloomberg laid out a series of steps. So he's not for the wealth tax that some of the biggest proponents of closing inequality are for. It's been Warren, and the criticism of that has been that when other countries tried it, it was impossible to really accurately assess assets and too easy for people with those big assets to hide them or get them lower value or challenge them. It costs you too much as a government to try to get that money. So they actually got rid of the program. So Bloomberg said he could do it. I'm just going to rattle it through. He said that the best way to raise $5 trillion was to have a 5% surtax on incomes over $5 million. And that's marginal. So if you make $5 million, after that, you're going to be paying 44.6% on that money. He would raise the corporate tax rate back up to 28%. Now that sounds like, okay, what's the big deal from 21? But we had cut it a lot under Trump. And even liberals thought you had to cut it because it was so much higher the rate than other countries that we couldn't compete. But then the criticism was that we cut it so much lower to give a break to high earners and corporations that they did not plow back in the economy. So Bloomberg says bring it to 28%. He said he wanted to raise the minimum corporate tax on foreign income so you don't move profits overseas. And this was interesting. He wants to tax capital gains as ordinary income if you make over $1 million. So if you earn over $1 million, that you can't get this way of having the money you make on capital gains pay less tax than what the average person pays. And he wants to end huge loopholes on estate taxes. So basically, he has a plan to get a lot more tax money out of people like Michael Bloomberg or people who make over $1 million a year in specific ways that try to bypass the barriers to collection.
Correct.
So did I just prove why no one's talking about it? Is that incredibly boring and hard to discuss?
I think so. But it's so critical to the future of our country, and closing the income inequality gap is.
But it's interesting that the guy who has $60 billion is the guy putting out the plan in specifics that might get the most money out of rich people.
He's also the same guy who grew up in very modest means, right? His father making $6,000 a year. He paid his way through college.
But can you talk about that issue? Can you convince people? I don't think you're going to be able to convince people that the billionaire in the race is the guy who has the best plan to get rich people to pay more.
I tend to think that Mike Bloomberg is somebody who's won 3 elections in bluest city and one of the bluest states in America, and is somebody who's a very good messenger on a number of issues, including that one.
Because I always wonder, how do you talk about issues in a campaign? So Warren had her moment. She had all these plans. But then the conventional wisdom switched that Sanders was beating her so badly because he did vision. So people say, don't tell me how you're going to cut income inequality. Don't tell me how you're going to get everyone on health care. Just tell me from your heart why it's a human right and why it's just a dramatic, different way of looking at it as why we're here on the planet and how we should be a society based on what the other side is saying. And then other people say, Klobuchar had the list of 100 things the president can do the first week that she's going to do. Warren had a plan for everything. There seemed to be more for that. Do you think maybe because you're in a campaign you have to say both matter? But where is American politics headed on how we talk about issues that way?
I mean, do you hear Donald Trump talking about issues very often? So I think that it's a difficult environment right now, and I think you need to be playing on, to your point, on all sides. But I think the key piece here is who can beat Donald Trump in November. And I think that Mike's the one getting under his skin, and Mike's the one with the best plans and vision for the future. And I think that's really where we need to be as a Democratic Party, backing somebody who can beat Donald Trump, but also is in line with Democratic values.
All right. And Brett Broesder, head of the Bloomberg Connecticut campaign. Let me give you a lightning round of all the bad things people are saying about Michael Bloomberg. We dealt with the biggie of the day, which is the stop and frisk. He said he apologized for it. It's good to have a president who can apologize, and he's done other stuff to kind of create opportunity in the black community. He's not a Democrat. He got elected as a Republican. He hosted the Republican National Committee. What's the response to that?
Mike Bloomberg is a registered Democrat who has put his money where his mouth is when it comes to key issues that are in line with Democratic values, be it climate change, guns, public health, and he is the person who can beat Donald Trump in November.
I guess Bernie Sanders isn't a Democrat either. Actually, technically, is not a good Democrat. So if it's Sanders against Bloomberg, that won't be an issue. Let's Klobuchar, Buttigieg, it will.
All I know is Mike Bloomberg is a registered Democrat.
Okay, other people check the idea of a billionaire buying his way into the race, using his money rather than convincing people one-on-one to be elected. Is there a concern about rich people buying public office?
Look, I think, again, Michael Bloomberg is somebody who grew up with very modest means, with a father who never made more than $6,000 a year and paid his way through college, was unemployed at 39, and is somebody who's very in line with American values and making smart investments in the future and beating Donald Trump in November.
All right. Is he too old? 75 years old? Are we Bernie 78, Biden 77 or 78? Are the candidates too old? Trump's in his mid 70s. Do we need people who can go the 8 years and have more energy?
Look, I think ageism is a really difficult problem in American politics, and I think that Mike Bloomberg, somebody with a track record of proven leadership, and that in America we see our life expectancy rising consistently, and
still think people can do the job at 80.
I'm pretty confident that's the case.
And then anti-Semitism. Are you concerned about the QAnon factor in American politics, the Charlottesville factor? That you will have a New York Jew who has a lot of money. So if Trump's on the ropes, there will be massive attacks on this guy for being a New York Jewish rich guy.
I'm very hopeful that we're outside of the anti-Semitism focus in American politics that I've never witnessed firsthand, and I hope doesn't exist. And that overall, the proven track record that Mike has on a number of issues, and that he can relate to a number of constituencies, I think is critical to him proving that he can beat Donald Trump.
Back in 2004, when Joe Lieberman was running for president, I was talking to him. I said, Joe, are you worried you're going to get shot? He said, because Joe's an Orthodox Jew. So, everybody asks me, but I'm not worried at all. He thinks that that anti-Semitism, while it's visible and a problem, is really not where America's at. He felt embraced by all backgrounds, including in the South. He wasn't worried about his safety. He didn't feel it was a disadvantage at all being Jewish. Kind of interesting. That out.
That's great, and I definitely think that's the case. And more importantly, when you're talking about guns, I think that it's a situation in which we need common sense gun reforms in this country, and Mike Bloomberg's been a advocate and put his money where his mouth is when it comes to that issue.
All right, it says, is he against socialism? And if he is, will he vote for Bernie if Bernie's the candidate?
Look, Mike Bloomberg has committed to keeping his offices open in those key 6 swing states through November, and is going to back the Democratic nominee, no matter who it is.
Including with Sanders.
Backing the Democratic nominee, no matter who it is.
And would he give money for advertising? Or just spend money attacking Trump with ads, even if he's not the candidate?
Yeah, I think you probably have to ask the candidate that. I can't imagine that that's the case, but that's his decision.
So you're having fun, Brett Broesder?
A lot of fun.
How does this compare to other campaigns you worked on?
It's amazing that it's a presidential race that's investing in states like Connecticut that for too long have been overlooked.
Yeah, and we are late. April 28th is kind of late.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that this could be contested all the way to the convention.
Yeah, it very well could be. But
so kind of for a guy like you, this might be kind of the most exciting job to date you've had? Or
it's very exciting. And to be...
you get to build it from the ground.
Working for the best candidate in the field, and the guy who's going to beat Donald Trump.
And clearly a candidate, from looking at your past, someone you really does dovetail with what you believe.
Definitely.
That helps.
Yeah, very much so. It's very helpful.
All right. Well, Britt Broesder, thanks so much for making the time to come in.
Hey, thank you so much,
thanks,
Paul.
Folks, for your questions and listening on WNHH. Thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. And thanks to the miracle man behind the controls, WNHH station manager Harry Droz. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.